Okay, San and Emily, you've just made me cry right before my talk. That was so contemplative, and I think you know me by now a little bit, that I do choke up whenever I'm in the presence of truth and love, and we're in the same room together, and on Zoom. That was just so beautiful. So, I guess that's going to be the tone of my talk. To be or not to be, that is the question. What does that mean? Decades ago, when we probably first heard it in high school or something, shoot, went right over my head, and I was too embarrassed to admit I didn't know what that meant. But I'm switching up the phrase, to disagree or not to disagree. And it's a more sensible question right now, and I hope at the end to establish that it's really not an appropriate question to even ask. I've got quite a few quotes and readings from mentors, and don't you just love it when you discover that ancient wisdom has been right all along? And we already know the stuff within ourselves, and we're just on a journey of revealing it and rediscovering it in our own lives. So to begin with, I'd like to just do a brief meditation. In fact, we've sort of done it, Alora, that was the perfect song. The meditation chant was perfect, and the meditation, so this is a little bit of a repeat of that, but I want to ask you a few questions afterwards. So let's just quickly go back to that meditative white light. You can close your eyes if you'd like. And just breathe in and relax and see the white light in front of you. Feel the white light behind you. The white light rising above you and on all sides. Imagine the white light underneath you. And you are basically a speck of dust floating in this white light in massive space. Take note of what you see. And when you're ready, you may come back to your chair, open your eyes if you'd like, stay in the white light if you'd like. So, did you see any lines of demarcation in that white light space? You don't have to answer really or raise your hand unless you want to nod your head. Were there any boxed in areas? Any walls of separation? Were there hierarchical steps, bright, brighter, brightest, levels or layers? Any darker or shadowy areas? Well, probably not, because we are stripping away all the constructs when we go within to this space of openness and infinity. The one mind, I call it a lot. And when we go within, it's like we are descending into the confines of our physical body, but really we are identifying with our heart space that invisibly connects us to the infinite one mind, one light, one love. In this bright essence lies the totality of life. There are no GPS signals, no points of reference, no counterpoints. There are no observable positions or oppositions. And I looked up the word position. I think we all can understand that it comes from, or it's related to pose, posit, posture, position. I'm going to play with that word a little bit later on in the talk. So in the mind of God is a flood of light and love, the emptiness and the allness. Alan Watts talks about it like this. This is not a direct quote. I've expanded on it a little bit. But he says there are two different kinds of light, a spotlight and a floodlight. A spotlight is my focused attention, me, my concerns, my angle, that which I stand for. And society has inundated us with this kind of seeing and speaking, analyzing, and then we end up defending. The other is the floodlight. It works all the time, he says. Every nerve ending is its instrument. Sadly, we have been trained to ignore our floodlight, consciousness. Some of us live life in the floodlights. We tend to have more mystical experiences or cosmic consciousness. Floodlight living is like living in the infinite mind of infinite possibilities. And thanks to centers like ours, we get a chance to explore these wonderful broad arrays of thinking and feeling and learning and growing. Now, when I stand with my spotlight, like a flashlight, I limit, let me go back up a little bit. When I stand with my spotlight, I bring limitation onto the ground or into a discussion that I might be having. I bring my posture, and if I hold a particular position, I curtail the flood of infinite light. Take gun reform. Very ripe issue in our nation. I've been involved a little bit with Moms Demand Action, and some of the initial training was about the use of language and how to express the issues, using inclusivity and not divisiveness. This is smart because as a spiritual path, it throws the floodlight onto the whole spectrum and not just the spotlight of limited vision. Now, this group is still very focused on the long view of how to augment change in the gun patterns in America. So they have to use some spotlight techniques. But when I think about how us, regular citizens, label groups, subgroups, we profess exclusion, push certain laws, then we are not bringing the full floodlight power of spirit. I don't know the answer to this humongous problem. No one does. But we sure do have a lot of opinions and emotions and positions. And some of them are very smart, but they don't serve everyone equally. And there may never be a political solution. Think about that. No political solution to freedom. I won't go into all the rhetoric around the many sides to this gun issue, and I'm sure you all are very familiar with it. But as a consciousness thing, the mind of God, the floodlight of wisdom and love is already on it. There is no one position or law or ordinance that is going to fix our gun violence epidemic. But if we were to back up and back away from the intense spotlight of our fears, our emotions, our cynicisms, our postures, and see it all, back up and see it all with the floodlight of love, then maybe something can be revealed to heal this thing. Well, I said maybe. I don't mean maybe. I know for sure that love prevails. Always. Think on it always. Those are, I'm standing in the room with truth right now. Gandhi said, love prevails. Think on it always. It's the think on it always part that I focus on. It's an action that we must do. It's not a fluff for quoting. It is a guide to a way of life. So, stepping back so that we can get a perspective and shine the floodlight on. Here's a quote from Archimedes. Learned a lot about him while I was preparing this talk. And I never heard this quote. Maybe some of you have. Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I can move the world. When I came across this quote, it was at the same time that my son was visiting from Hawaii, and he was helping me with some things around my old house. Now, I'd like to explain for some of you that don't know, I've referenced this quite a bit, but I have a big old two-story 1927 Sears package home, and the main beams in the basement are, you know, taking a toll of gravity and all that weight. So I've got 3 jack posts that are about 6 feet tall, but they only come with like a little 3-inch lever to turn that screw. Well, I did pretty good. I got me, I found something around the house to add 15 inches to it. And in the beginning, I was cranked it a little bit, but not very much. Well, Archimedes and my son taught me that I needed a longer lever. And we found a 6-foot bar. And I am lifting that whole damn house 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch up to a certain point. I'm stuck. I think I need someone with much bigger muscles and more body mass to get behind it. But the power comes from exerting force on the longer end away from the thing I want to move. Well, as I searched more about Archimedes, he's a Greek engineer who lived over 200 years before Jesus walked the earth. I found an engineering website that made this statement. Archimedes thought he had a lever in his brain which gave him a standing place to move the world. Well, if he has a lever in his brain, we all do. I'm not sure if that is referring to standing at the end of the lever or standing at the fulcrum, but that's something to be contemplated, and anybody that wants to comment on at the end, feel free to teach us all about this simple machine. So as I was contemplating this, my book, Power versus Force, came to my aid. Now, I have not read this book in its entirety. How many of you have gotten books and you just read the title or and you know what's in it? You get started and you go, yeah. I mean, especially if you've been on the journey as long as I have. The title here, Power, that represents the floodlight. Force, that's the spotlight. Yeah. And so I'd like to refer, I've got several readings, sections that I'd like to share because I think you'll appreciate his authority more than mine. But David Hawkins did this research in the 1960s, and the book came out in the 1990s. So can you imagine how much more has been built on and evolution and the growth? I mean, this is important stuff, and he's got studies and so forth that have puts the science label on it. To begin with, the idea of having to start from chapter 1 and read progressively to the end is merely a fixed left brain concept. This is the pedestrian path of Newtonian physics based on a limited and limiting view of the world in which all events supposedly happen in an ABC sequence. This form of myopia, and I wish I had a flashlight here because that's what he's talking about, arises from an outdated paradigm of reality. Our wider and far more comprehensive view draws not only upon the essence of the most advanced physics, mathematics, and nonlinear theory, but as well upon intuitions that can be experientially validated by anyone. Then, I love this. This really represents the an example of power. Can man lift himself up by his bootstraps? Well, a lot of people in America think that millions of people should be. Why not? All he has to do is increase his buoyancy, and he will effortlessly rise to a higher state. Force cannot accomplish that feat. Power not only can, but constantly does. Man thinks he lives by virtue of the forces he can control, but in fact, he is governed by power from unrevealed sources, power over which he has no control. Because power is effortless, it goes unseen and unsuspected. Force is experienced through the senses. Power can be recognized only through inner awareness. And that's by a scientist. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, we've got to hash out details. We've got to have arguments, and we've got to show people what's wrong in society and the problem. But my last reading by David Hawkins will explain maybe something different. Excuse me. Society constantly expends its efforts to correct effects instead of causes, which is one reason why the evolution of human consciousness proceeds so slowly. Mankind is barely on the first rung of the ladder. We haven't even solved such primitive problems as world hunger. The accomplishments of mankind thus far, in fact, are most impressive for having been achieved almost blindly through trial and error. While this random search for solutions has resulted in a maze of baffling complexity, true answers always have the hallmark of simplicity. The basic law of the universe is economy. The universe does not waste a single quark. All serves a purpose and fits into a balance. There are no extraneous events. Man is stuck with the lack of knowledge about himself. Let's rephrase that. Humans are stuck with their lack of knowledge about themselves until they can learn to look beyond apparent causes. From the human record, we may note that answers never arise from identifying causes in the world. Instead, it is necessary to identify the conditions that underlie ostensible causes, and these conditions exist only within man's consciousness itself. No definitive answer to any problem can be found by isolating the sequences of events and projecting upon them a mental notion of causality. In other words, when we are focused on the causes or the effects, we think we're dealing with the causes. That's why we waste so much time. There are no causes within the observable world. As we shall demonstrate, the observable world is a world of effects. Well, I say this because I really chose this material here because we see this old approach in government, politics, boardrooms, people in general. We show up only addressing, we're freaking out about the effects of what we see in our environment. This is not where the creative power lies. Showing up to just discourse on the effects of poverty or immigration or war puts us in the spotlight strategy. Everyone at the table is shining their own flashlight every which way, and that's what he's talking about. Maybe once in a while, a couple spotlights will intersect and a solution will come forth by chance, trial and error. The power of the floodlight is where creative potential and the truth lie. We need floodlights in our Congress. We need floodlights in our boardrooms. We need floodlights in, schools or wherever decisions or wherever problems are being hashed out. We need floodlight consciousness. Spotlights cut the universe up. And it takes a lot of energy to heal and bridge the cuts that we have made in our world. Ernest Holmes says there is one power in the universe and we can all use it. One power. The power is the field of unlimited potential. Where's that field? What's that field? Remember that field that we're all going to meet at someday? Well, it's not just a beautiful, grassy, flower-filled space on a hill somewhere in the future. It is the creative field of possibilities right here and right now. And the people that I want to meet there are not just all of you, but everyone who has different effects and conditions, different stories, values, views, people who have different things going on than from my experiences. It's not about being right or forcing change. It is about the experience of the field in the moment, in the infinite floodlight of love. What shall we bring to this field when we get there? Which is all the time, really. We're in the field right now. What will we be bringing? What are we bringing? Not a future tense verb. What are we bringing to this field, to this very moment? And that is based on a Rumi quote, and I'm going to close with the full quote. But I'm going to play with it a little bit. So imagine being in that field. There is a field out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing. There is a field. Let's walk there. Or I'll meet you there. And when the soul lies down in that grass and we look up at that infinite sky, the world is too full to talk about.